How to push your kitchen efficiency with the current labor shortage? High-quality frozen vegetable and legume blends are the answer. No more peeling, washing, and sanitizing. By using frozen vegetables and legumes, you will get optimal results in no time. Arctic Garden's products offer highly customizable options for all your ideas. From soups to desserts, the possibilities are endless.
In the food service industry, approximately 22 billion to 33 billion pounds of fresh produce are lost to spoilage every year due to inefficiency. Not only do Arctic Garden's incredible variety of frozen fresh vegetables offer endless menu inspiration, but their year-round availability also makes them the perfect, sustainable solution to help you avoid food waste while serving up the farm-to-table flavors today's customers demand.
Welcome to ACF Chefs Forum. We appreciate all of you tuning in today for this webinar and hope you're ready to learn more about sustainable kitchens as we focus on food waste. It's very important for culinarians to connect, to share, and to offer inspiration and mentorship, which is exactly why we're excited to have an expert here with information just for you, the leaders and future leaders of the food service industry. Thanks again to Arctic Gardens for bringing us today's learning opportunity. Before we begin, as a note, we'll be answering your questions after the presentation. Please use the chat function to collaborate with other viewers and the Q&A function to pose questions to today's speaker. So let's get that conversation going in the chat. If you haven't already, please let us know where you're tuning in from today. I'm Jackie Pressinger, American Culinary Federation's Director of Strategic Partnerships, and I'm thrilled to have an industry professional here with us today to discuss food waste utilization. Chef Vince Pianalto is a chef instructor at Brightwater, a center for the study of food. But I know there's a lot to cover today, and this is a very important topic. So at this time, let's take a virtual trip to Arkansas as I pass the presentation over to our special guest. Thanks in advance, Chef Vince.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, everyone that's attending today. I'm Chef Vince Pinalto. I'm a baking and pastry instructor here for Brightwater, a center for the study of food in Bentonville, Arkansas. Yes, Arkansas. We have a culinary school here, and we have been in business now at this facility for 6 years, and we've been really, really fortunate to be able to think about how food gets to the table, how food gets 100% utilized, and just how to make sure that we honor what happens in our kitchens. And so Brightwater when we opened up Brightwater, one of our core functions was to make sure we knew where our food was coming from using our food systems classes and things like that, and also trying to do nearly 100% utilization of all the products that are coming in and trying to minimize what was going into a waste situation. And we're doing that. We've got a couple of things that we do. We here at the school, we have our own composting program where if we can't utilize the waste, it goes into a composting situation for our perennial gardens around the outside of the school. We also have contact with a system here in Northwest Arkansas, what is called food loops, and anything that we can't compost can go to them, and they have a massive composting situation where they can take product that we might not be able to compost and send it into the composting situation. One of the things I want to talk about is how my personal arc of how I became a chef who needs to understand more readily zero food waste. I've been in the business now for 42 years, and back in the 80s, early 90s, when I was starting my career out, the word sustainability didn't exist. It did exist in certain pockets, like in California, whatever. But the majority of us, we ordered our food, hoped that it showed up to the restaurant, did what we would normally do with it, and that was that. And no thought was given to that food traveled 1,500 miles to get to my restaurant, or poor farming practices, or any of those kind of scenarios where the sustainability aspect of what we were doing in the kitchens was just not even discussed. And the nice thing is, as my arc of culinary has happened, now I'm working in a facility where, what are we going to do with this once it's, done its initial purpose? We do foundations where all the vegetables are diced, bétonné, all the things that we do with vegetables, but we still have a lot of what we would consider a waste program. So like, is it going to go into our stock, which a lot of our vegetable waste goes to stock. Even with our butchery program, we get bones and things for stock. So that's kind of the like no-brainer sustainability, no waste program. But what can we do with all some of the other things? Like, we do concasse as a class. There's seeds and there's skins that are utilized in that process. But what are you going to do with those things? You can't. In my own restaurant, we would take those products and put them into a tray and put them on top of our ovens and just let them dry. We didn't have a fancy dehydrator back when I first started out. But we'd let things like tomato peels dry, or mushroom scraps, or any of these types of vegetables, and let them completely dehydrate and turn them into powders that we then could use as a umami bomb into our plate of food that's going to go out to the guests. We can use tomato powder, spinach powder, things like that into the pastas that we were making, and creating homemade pastas with those flavoring profiles. So it's a couple of things that you have to kind of consider when you're focusing. And that's what I think I want us to understand today, is about how to focus on sustainability in the kitchen. We have to consider a couple of things. One, the team has to congeal around the idea of, we don't want to throw anything away, or we want to minimize every single thing that goes into the garbage. Main thing for a chef or an owner or anybody is that every time you throw something into the trash, you might as well open up a wallet and throw money into the trash, because that's virtually what you're doing. The money savings when you do a value-added product like making a dust out of dry, dehydrated mushroom scraps, is measurable over time quite easily. And so you have to consider the monetary gain that you can get from recovering all those types of products, or making new ideas as far as in the regards of, what can we, why can't we eat the peels of carrots? I mean, if they're scrubbed and clean, there's nothing saying that we couldn't just eat the entirety of a carrot, or many other vegetables that we utilize in the kitchens. You also want to get a mindset of respecting the entirety of the product. Here at Brightwater, we really try to do a very good job of, like, snoot to toot, where we utilize the entirety of the animal. I mean, they come in to our butchering program dressed, but that's it. So how can we utilize 100% or nearly 100% of that product? So it's respecting the life of the animal, respecting the life of the vegetable, even though, that doesn't seem like it has the same lifespan or whatever. But why would you want a farmer to put so much work into a product that's showing up to your restaurant or school or whatever that case may be, and you disrespect it by wasting the product, letting it rot? You don't utilize it in time where we deem it unusable. So respecting the product has to be important to the team, to the owner, to the chef. And so that makes you think. So that leads into the next thing, where the team has to come up, use their intellect, use their curiosity to utilize more of the product itself. And what I mean by that, well, you can sit around a table of staff and say, how can we use the stems, the leaves, the peel, all of the things that are being utilized or brought into the kitchen that would otherwise go into the trash. So, for example, again, we talked about concasse, and I dehydrated some skins and seeds and whatnot to almost like tomato chips right here. And I'm going to process them into a powder using a spice grinder. Super simple. Food, if you have a freeze drying apparatus at your facility, that is another good way to create these super dehydrated products. For me personally, I am a pastry chef by trade, by training, and I don't know how many of y'all that aren't pastry chefs, but had to like purchase vanilla beans. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but my goodness, when they got up to $400 a pound, my brain was like, okay, I'm not throwing a gram of these products away. So how, what can I do to make sure that I get 100% utilization out of that product? So I think you have to make sure that everybody's on board. We don't want to waste, disrespect any of those things that I'm paying good money for. We're paying good money for all these products. It's literally, a deal breaker to want to not utilize 100%. So how does that happen? Well, here at Brightwater, we really strive a couple of things to buy as local as possible. That way, again, that transportation costs, that viability of the product, because it's not grown halfway across the country or all the way across the country and brought to you out of season or any of those things. I can't tell you how many brides I've had to talk down from wanting a strawberry cake in December, because why would you want that even at all? And so you just want to make sure that sustainability is also seasonality of the product itself, and making sure that whenever you are ordering, to take those things into consideration. Now, in a live practice, you want to be able to show how easy it is, because composting is manual. It takes a lot of man hours. It takes a lot of thought process, because you can't put certain items into the compost. You have to make sure you have an equal brown-green mix into the compost to make it viable and do its thing. So you have to commit manpower and thought into instigating that kind of a program. And it's also the same when you're trying to get the scraps of what you're making in the kitchen usable product for later on. And so, you have to make sure that your staff understands, hey, we're going to try to find a solution as a team to get this, how to make something different. This is how I think innovation in recipes happen, by creating new pathways or uses for different food products that are coming in and out of the kitchen. Like tomato water. That was brought into the fold, in the late 90s, early 2000s, where you were using the water that usually we would throw away that drainage into, usually the sink from using concasse or whatever. And now you can use it as a actual ingredient into the dish itself. And so you have to kind of just, how can I utilize what's going on in the kitchen? What I'm going to do is create a couple of things for you today. Again, I've dehydrated some tomato peels. It's literally just the peels and some seeds. And spice grinder is probably the best way to make that happen. It really does a good job of making it to a blend. I've got a spice grinder off here to the side. bear with me while I make a little bit of noise. I'll try not to talk. You can take all the seeds, all the skins, anything that's not utilized into the actual, from the concasse and make it into a tomato powder. So bear with me with 10 seconds while I blend this up. You can see, I don't know if my camera can pick it up here, that it literally obliterates everything to just a dust. I could use that as a garnish onto the plate, a flavoring product into a soup. Again, I could use it into my pasta. We used to use this into make fresh egg pasta at my restaurant, and now I've zero waste on tomato because I've used it in every possible scenario. Another thing, spinach is very good for that. Like arugula, those types of things make really excellent powders for additions to dishes and product lines like that. Again, we were going back to carrots. Whenever, back in the day, we just peeled them. That maybe went into the peels went into the stock water. We use the carrots, but we always kind of threw away the carrot tops. And that was like, like what can we do besides composting carrot tops, but fully utilize? I literally just picked these carrot tops out of our garden 30 minutes before this presentation. I'm going to make an arugula pesto with carrot tops and everything else being traditional. We're just going to blend that into a Roku and make everything else being the same, except not using basil. And we're going to use some baby arugula, which we had left over from an event that we had about 2 days ago. And otherwise, hopefully, we were going to be able to utilize it. But what if it was, didn't really have a source to go to? So I've just got about a cup of baby arugula here. All the carrot tops with some stem, because these are baby. They're barely, not very much of age. I'm going to take that with 3 cloves of garlic and about a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. Some shredded Parmesan cheese, about a 1/2 cup. A sprinkle of salt. I'm just going to do a pinch. I'm going to test it for salt, but I think the cheese is going to have enough salt in there that makes it happen. And I'm going to blitz this just for a little bit. Kind of grew up with pesto in my Italian grandma's kitchen. So this, I'm not too sure she would approve of using carrot tops in pesto, but like I said, she was a kind of a traditionalist, and we'd see how it smells delicious though. It's very interesting because her pesto would be like very basil-y, obviously. This one's got that kind of pungent aroma. I wish we had smell-o-vision. Wouldn't that be nice? I'm gonna build this for just a little bit longer. Hold on. For some reason, my Roku is super quiet here. I don't know why. It's not in my kitchen. And I just gave it a good little blitz. Smells wonderful. I'm going to test it. Where's my testing spoons? Test it for some salt. It doesn't need any. So after I harvested the carrots, I gave them a light steam. Just cut them in half. The arugula is a little hot. Give it a little bit of pesto. I drizzle a little good olive oil. And that's a really killer side dish. Literally using 100% of the carrot itself to make sure that happens. So as we're thinking about sustainability, utilizing 100%, I did pride myself on like having very little waste going in the garbage. at my own restaurants. And so it made sense that here at school, it just kind of came about as a naturally occurring situation for us. Now, we talked about vanilla beans. About 2 years ago, I don't know, vanilla crop had a massive failure, and these got to nearly $400 per pound. They're still $150 a pound. So don't get me wrong, they're still a very expensive product to buy for a pastry kitchen. But it's easy to actually use 100% of this bean. Now, normally we would split the bean and get the seeds out, right? That's what you come to expect from vanilla bean usage. Put it into your pastry cream, put it into your whipped cream, whatnot, all your flavor. But once the bean is split and used in the creams or those other types of applications, what am I going to do with what's left over? Well, the easiest thing to do as a pastry chef is submerge it into just white sugar. Now, this sugar's been going on for about, I don't know, 30 days. And what happens is it 100% desiccates the split bean part. I mean, it's like very dried out, very, very, very desiccated. Now, the sugar itself took on vanilla flavor. So we literally call it vanilla sugar to put it on top of cookies or cakes or any kind of application like that. But I'm still with these beans that are left over. And the cool thing is, again, I'm looking at how am I going to save money. I'm going to, again, put these into a slice grinder, give them a little blitz because they're so dry right now. They will, that was already done. They turn into the nicest powder. I don't have another dish, I'll put it, but a little powder that I now will utilize in all of my dry mixes. Say I'm mixing muffins or a cake or anything that we all like vanilla flavor into. I can utilize 100% of that vanilla bean as a flavoring profile product into that product. And now I have recovered 100% or more of I've gotten more value out of that bean than I would have ever gotten by just flavoring a pastry cream or a whipped cream or whatever cream may have been made from them. So you have to just think outside of the box. You have to literally say, what can I do? What can't I do? Because believe it or not, the answer is more what can I do than the opposite. We, over the course of the years, have trained ourselves to kind of be a throwaway society. And now we're having to rethink that because if we want to create food for people, we have to make sure it's there for us to create. Bananas will probably disappear in your children's lifetime. Flight, climate change, all the things that are happening with the world's growing systems. So we're probably not going to see bananas as we know them in our later on in our lifetime. Within the next 50 years, chocolate is also going to be affected highly by climate change and certain things like that. So we have to do what we can to make sure that when we are looking at these products that we want to order in, to make sure that we are good stewards of food for our customers or our families, whichever the case may be. We also here at Brightwater want to make sure that you understand how this food gets to your table. Too often I've taught high school, I've taught college kids that didn't understand that meat, vegetables, they don't just automatically show up into the stores in a box. They thought that meat would come into that little platter already cut up. And so to make sure that our students fully understand, hey, there's a huge process of getting farm to table on whether it be meat, vegetable, fruit, whatever, isn't just automatic, and we aren't able to just think that we're always going to have it available to us. Like I said, those brides didn't understand why I wouldn't want to make a cake flavored with a strawberry that's 6 months out of season and has zero flavor that's going into their cake. Well, and they'll come look at me and say, well, how come this cake doesn't taste right? Well, let me tell you why it doesn't taste right. You're not using the proper seasonal fruit for your product. And so that makes it very important for us to train or teach, however the case may be, students, the community, everybody that comes to us, how seasonality plays a huge part in how to stay sustainable, because growing things out of season is not a sustainable practice. Growing things out of your zone, we're here in like 6-7 zone, is not a sustainable practice. And we have to make sure that we also understand from the farmer's point of view how they are more comfortable providing us with the seasonal products that they're comfortable growing, grazing, and making sure that we also can help them. It's a very reciprocal thing for us to work with farmers, with the suppliers for us, and making sure that we can utilize their product with respect, with seasonal knowledge and things like that. So what we're going to do also is we're going to talk about how we can take products and make different dishes with them. So how can you sit there and talk to your staff? How can we make sure we're going to use product in an unusual way? Like a lot of restaurateurs will sit around and do this type of discussion. What can we do to create a new product or a new dish or a new taste? And I think that's very important. Otherwise, that's how new recipes are developed, by changing people's thought process on, oh, I've always had this dish with this flavor, but why? What's causing you to rely on it? Now, cuisine types often have some very not rigid rules, but like you expect certain things depending on the cuisine, and that's understandable. But nothing is set in stone that we have to. Italians don't have to always have garlic, and Asian foods do not always have to have ginger. We need to be able to create new products by changing the flavors, not dramatically, not crazily, but like, why can't we add certain things to certain dishes and not change out what's going on? So I think it's important that we would all be eating the same food stuffs if we didn't go out of our comfort zone and try to add or change what the traditional norms are. And we can do that, again, by utilizing 100% of using the leaves, using the stems of vegetables, using the parts of the animal that you might not have considered an edible food product. That's how my grandmother, a lot of people's ancestors who were poor immigrants, I come from a poor immigrant Italian family from the 1800s. They didn't throw away a scrap of anything. And that's what we have to get back to. We kind of like the pendulum swung after the ancestors, my relatives came back. And now that I feel like we as a society, as a food, as a consumer, the pendulum has to swing back at least to the middle, and making sure that there's a reason we want to make sure we're going to have a farm that creates food. Without farms, food doesn't happen. And that's what we have to respect. We have to make sure that we don't put the demands on the producers so far that they aren't able to make the product we want. And so I think that's very poignant with, especially like farm. My grandfather, God love him, he would grow zucchini for my restaurant, and I always wanted like zucchini like this, and he would bring them to me like this. I'm like, Granddad, you need to like make sure that they're a little smaller because they're a lot less tough. And he didn't understand it. He's like, the bigger was you had more, and that was kind of their old mindset. I think even some other chefs on the East Coast are talking about taking squashes from large size to small, creating a situation where they're more flavorful, the consuming of the product was more enjoyable because flavors were concentrated. And we just have to make sure that we work with those types of growers and producers and not try to force them into a situation where we're not going to be able to have a sustainable relationship. So we here at Brightwater really work hard to make sure that we're working closely with a lot of our protein producers that are within about 100-mile radius of the school itself. We work with local farmers that grow produce for us. We also have the luxury of having some on-site gardens and a greenhouse to produce some of our really fun little herbs and vegetables that we can utilize in class. So we just try to make sure, again, those relationships that we build with producers, farmers, growers, and students of our school, making sure that they understand that we have to work together as a group, as a team, as a society to create a situation where sustainable kitchens that we can make sure runs properly. Like if it's too much of a chore for a restaurateur to create sustainable processes, it's not going to happen. So we have to make sure that as we kind of think through these processes, that it's going to work. It's going to be not seamless, but like with less friction from the team, the group that's working with the products. It has to make sense. And if it doesn't make sense to the kitchen staff, or if it doesn't make sense to the school, the students class, it's not going to happen. And then we're fighting a battle that we can't recover from. So we have to make sure that what we're trying to accomplish is obviously sustainable, but also in a situation where without the effort that it causes friction. That's where we have to, as a restaurant team, the cohesiveness of that team is very much like a family. And again, we have to make sure that the family is working towards the same goal. I hope that really kind of helps the thought process. And so like, as we kind of like think about this, does anybody have any best practices that they do at their facility or anything like that? Because like I said, we have a full composting program. We have a full waste. Like we try to make sure we're trying to go to like a 95% no waste facility within the next 3 to 5 years. So have we, as a teacher, as an old school chef, we have to start that kind of education from day one. The day one that the students arrived at the classroom, that's how we can make sure we can instill the values of sustainability into a student into an institution, into a restaurant setting. That has to start, and the sooner, the faster, the better you implement that, the more success you'll have, the better understanding of what's going to happen at the restaurant or the school will make sure that you can feel good about and do good about utilizing product. So does anybody have any questions that I could possibly answer, or is there any best practices that maybe you could let us know about that would make?
Yes, Chef, we do have some questions that have come in. The first one is, what are some of the suggested uses for the tomato powder that you produce?
So and the great thing is it's got so many uses. So tomato powder, spinach powder, mushroom powder, all of those things. They're an instant umami blast into a soup or a sauce. Literally whatever thing you can think of that a tomato flavor can go into. I'd like to sprinkle it on the top of a pasta dish as that really intense tomato flavor, because we've literally erased all the water out. And so you have 100% tomato flavor that's going right directly onto the product. Again, we would add it to the egg pasta dish mix and make a tomato, whatever pasta you want to make. We usually made a spaghetti out of a tomato pasta. So it's got so many applications, and you can do the same thing with mushroom or spinach or any kind of vegetable scrap. Like if we peeled eggplant, we could make a powder out of the eggplant skins as we dehydrate them. So any type of carrots, definitely the peels would go on a tray above my oven. It'd probably sit there for like a couple of days because it was kind of a constant low temp, and we could pulverize it into a powder in about 2 to 3 days. So you're kind of left to your imagination. Whatever you can think of, it can go to. I don't know that there's a bad answer, to be perfectly honest. It could just go into almost everything. Heck, I'd put it on vanilla ice cream.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, one of the other questions is, what might you suggest, or how do you utilize veg that's already been cooked and properly cooled, but it wasn't used in the service the day before? Do you have any ways that you like to use already cooked veg instead of tossing that out?
Yeah, so with already cooked product, and it can be any veg, really and truly. My go-to is to create a puree or send it through a sieve. I puree it and then sieve it into something so that you always have, and you can freeze it. That's a perfectly freezable product at that point. You don't want to freeze already cooked veg in a whole pattern. You really would want to puree it into like a smooth paste or whatever, which can then be made into a sauce or a soup or a multitude of different things. Can be stirred into soups quite easily. Can be made into a bit of a gastrique type scenario. So yeah, anything that's already cooked. And if it's a medley of vegetables that are cooked, you can puree it all together. If it were singular, obviously puree. It's just super easy to not. I think the thing that we really want to concentrate on is like, man, any of us that have been in the restaurant business or in schools and whatnot, we all know that there's corners in the cooler that kind of product goes into, never to show up again for like 6 months. And making sure that we are vigilant in getting the coolers cleaned and rotated and things like that, and making sure that we do pay attention to that product before it goes so south that it literally is garbage. So pureeing and then freezing, like maybe into ice cube trays that you can utilize. I have to do that, and then you can pop out the ice cubes, put them into a Ziploc, and then I have easy access to getting to them to put them into the food product at that point.
Excellent. Okay, we have a couple more if you're up for it.
Good.
And for anyone who's tuning in, please be sure to enter your questions in as well. Does your program, this is the next question, does your program cover or do you have any tips for either canning or the benefits of freezing produce in peak season to prevent waste on the vine and to preserve best flavor?
We actually have a facility, one of the kitchens, it's called our seasonal kitchen. And so that entire kitchen is set up in a way to extend the life of that very thing. So we have a preservation class that concentrates on canning products, or just, so in that kitchen, it's a really cool setup because in there we have freeze dryers. That's excellent for taking berries or we did jalapeno peppers in there, made jalapeno dust that we freeze dried and then pulverized. We have dehydrators, we have smokers. So you can take product like cheeses and meats and things like that to preserve those types of things. We have the massive tilt skillets we make stock by the gallons and gallons and gallons here. So there's always, we have the preservation class also works. I think they made soy sauce, taking soybeans which are an Arkansas product big time, and we made soy products that extended the life of the bean itself. Tofu, soy milk. I think they're working on soy sauce right now. I think they're aging it out as we speak. So here at Brightwater, we have a wonderful program of education to make sure that extending that life, especially on produce, which tends to be the quickest one that wants to go bad on us. So we really concentrate on how can we take that thing, make it shelf stable, and making sure that we have some, like I have a lot of freeze dried berries in the bake shop right now that obviously we're past berry season, but now I could put them into scones and cakes and stuff like that to make sure I could have some winter flavored product.
Okay, we have a couple of more questions that are coming in, so thank you very much. One of the questions that just came through was, how would you recommend adding these methods for utilization to menus and recipes? This chef has to have their menus approved months in advance, and they're finding it hard to incorporate food waste into specials or menus when things are so rigid at their workplace. So planning ahead for food waste is the idea that the chef's trying to get your insights on.
I think, okay, it's great. It's hard when you're having to go so far out into the future with a menu, and so what I would suggest, and it's kind of not what we would think of as a chef or a food service person, is thinking so far ahead that the cycle, like however long your cycle of menu planning has to be, that it actually will extend to that next cycle. Say like vanilla sugar. I mean, that's a weird one for me to think about, but making these dehydrated freeze-dried products, their shelf life is beyond 6 months. So you may be able to not think a week ahead, 2 weeks ahead, but really think that 6 month, that next year timeline, where I've got some prosciuttos that are hanging in a curing cabinet that are on almost their 3rd year before they're ready to go. So maybe try to not think, oh, I can do this in 2 weeks, a month. Maybe kind of think about when that menu has to be approved and when it's going to be implemented, and think about, oh, I can add dehydrated mushroom into that soup dish or that. So maybe instead of really kind of focusing on short term, really going into that long term thing, because basically we're preserving things to utilize in a future tense, basically. So I think you can do it, but you may be thinking oh, I don't have time to do that, but think longer than you may expect.
Excellent. Okay. We do have a specific question here. One of the chefs is wondering what ingredients or spices you might pair or dishes you might make with beet tops. I guess they have an abundance of beet tops.
Beet tops are one of my favorites because I actually like them better than the beets. But beet tops are amazing stir fry. So even the stems have a crunch to them that kind of mimics bok choy, in my opinion. They will stain everything, unfortunately, but like I do love, obviously the greens without some of the stems are an amazing addition to stew or soups. But I love to do a stir fry with the beets tops, the entirety of the beet top. So and like I said, I kind of prefer them to actual beet consumption because only time I like beets are like pickled, but which is another preservation longevity thing. But so yeah, don't ever throw away beet tops and stems. I also like treat Swiss chard leaves and stems in the same manner, where most people take the stems and get rid of them. They make an excellent crunch factor to. I used to put the sauteed the stems of beets and Swiss chard and put them on top of like a roasted vegetable tart, for because the vegetables underneath would be kind of a bit soft, and you would have the crunch of the stems of the Swiss chard or the beet on top. So it made a killer texture change for a tart like that. So don't ever throw those away. Radish, same thing. Do a French butter preparation on radishes themselves, but then you saute the greens, and you can even like puree them or just chop them in a chiffonade and use that as a top dressing for like that old school French French butter radish preparation.
Awesome. Okay. One of the other questions has to do with ugly produce, and what your feelings are around that, since most of the produce that we're buying is selected to be the best looking.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, France actually has an ugly produce program being implemented in the country to make sure that. One of the saddest things that, as a culinarian, that I'd ever heard, I was in a food styling class, this was 20 years ago, and the statistic of ugly produce was that only less than 25% of produce in the field was deemed sellable, while the other 75% was ugly. And I think that it is tragic for us as a society, as a consumer of food, to think that every piece of vegetable and fruit that we consume has to be the same size, the same color, the same anything really. And why have we trained ourselves to think less of something that's misshapen? Is the flavor different? Doubtful. I think that it's going to have to be a shift in how we think about that type of product. I fight it in my kitchens whenever kids see an onion or an apple that's a little less than what they expect. I'm like, so I think we, as a whole, are going to have to kind of teach our others that those ugly fruits, ugly vegetables are 100% the same consumable product as that really pretty, shiny apple, orange, whatever. So I think we really need to just say it's okay to utilize something that's not perfect. As a chef, we sit there and we go, we want to always use the best available product we can get. And I understand that. But just because it's ugly and misshapen doesn't mean it's still a wonderful product. We have to collectively change the way we feel about that not so good looking product.
All right, great. We have another kind of specific question. This one's a little bit tough. Anything that you can recommend for not having to toss overcooked pasta out?
Okay, I've seen this. My ancestors are horrible at overcooking pasta. They're like the worst about it. So what can you do with it? Well, one of the ways I've dealt with it is I've food processed it or blended it into a paste and made gnocchi out of the overcooked pasta. I had to like blend it to a paste, and add a little more flour and egg into the product itself, and then you could make a little cavatelli or a gnocchi out of it that would make it palatable. Like I said, my relatives were kind of like horrid at overcooking pasta, so I had to kind of figure out a way myself. So turning it into a dumpling of some sort is probably your best bet.
All right. Well, thank you. And this will probably be our last question before we go into your final thoughts. But this chef is wondering, what's one thing that they can do in their kitchen starting today, or one thing they can speak to their staff about today at Family Meal or Lineup to start the process of becoming more aware of sustainable practices?
I think the question's great because it can lead right into kind of a wrap up scenario, because starting the conversation is the best possible scenario, because getting interaction with the team is going to be your best outcome. When you're sitting at that family meal, you're sitting in that staff meeting, just say, here's my thoughts on how we're going to proceed. Now, what you can't do is say, this is what we're going to do starting now, and it's in like I can't not, you can't refute it. That's not really the way to approach a sustainable system. What you want to do is throw that idea to the team. Let them take charge. Give them the initiative to come up with ideas. How can we implement some sustainable practices in the kitchen? How can we not throw away carcasses that we've taken meat off of, if that's what you do in your kitchen? How can we lessen the amount of product that I'm going to throw into? I've made apple pies for Thanksgiving and I've got a ton of peels and cores. What can I do with them? I can boil them for about 3 hours and turn it into the best apple jelly that you can possibly imagine. So let them come up with ideas to bring to the table and start. You have to do baby steps. It cannot be an all or nothing scenario. It has to be a gradual change in the mindset of the group, in the vision of the group. I think it's probably a better term. It's a vision that you're going to undertake, and let them lead the charge. Let the crew, let the students. I can say, oh, we're going to compost everything, and I get some pushback and stuff like that. So I think it's super important to say, how can we as a team, as a group, help our society, our growers produce a sustainable product for us to utilize, and how can we help them in return? I think that's how you do it. But it can't be all or nothing. It has to be gradual. Has to be. It's like moving a ship, changing directions. We've been a very big ship for a very long time, not worried about sustainability, and it's going to take a long-ish time for us to right that ship.
All right. Well, any final thoughts, final words, anything you'd like to leave us with today, Chef?
What I want y'all to take away, and I appreciate y'all sticking with me for an hour, because I don't even like me for an hour, but make sure, if this is something you want to try to accomplish, don't get discouraged. It's not going to be an overnight change in your thought process. You're going to kind of have hiccups in trying to make sure that you're going to utilize local ingredients, local farmers, and make their sustainable. It's a marathon and not a foot race. And so making sure you, as a group, as a chef, as a teacher, as whatever, know that kind of change is going to be slow and incremental, but we can't change without that slow incremental happening, and it will happen. It will happen, and so don't be discouraged. Just do what you can. Every little bit helps, and we're just gonna keep on cooking.
Well, great words to leave us by. Thank you so much. A huge virtual round of applause as we thank Chef Vince for a very informative presentation today. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to share your insights on food waste and utilization with the ACF community of culinary professionals today. And for those of you tuning in, please be on the lookout for the recording and the survey that you'll receive in the next day or so. And as a reminder, we'll need you to complete the survey in order to earn your 1 hour of CEH. We hope that you'll join us for our next webinars. One of them will be held tomorrow, October 18th, when we'll be covering festive feasts and ideas for crafting your holiday buffets. So you get started on your menus in advance during our live demo tomorrow. And on October 23rd, we'll focus on helpful holiday menu planning with the Association of Nutrition and Food Service Professionals. Now, it's almost sold out, but there is still time to register for the Advanced Pastry Summit to be held this Friday, October 20th, at Johnson & Wales University in Charlotte, North Carolina. So please go to acfchefs.org under the Events tab to register today. For more information, inspiration, culinary news, and to register for upcoming webinars, please check out our website, wearechefs.com. So on behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again to Arctic Gardens for bringing us this opportunity. Thank you again to Chef Vince and to Brightwater. And thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.